This is the HEX Phantom Pro Controller. Is it good for fighting games? Let's talk about it. It comes in this nice fancy box. This controller is on Kickstarter right now. If you order the higher tiers, you're gonna get a case with it as well. The logo definitely looks like something that came out of Transformers, right? You also get this really long braided cable. Check out how nice the plugs are. This is all metal. And here's the controller. This thing works on the PS5 and on the PC. At first glance, this thing looks and feels exactly the same as the DualSense. Here's the DualSense. There you go. They're basically the same. If you don't know who HEX Gaming is, essentially they mod existing controllers and they add extra buttons and whatnot to make it more suited for esports. And that's what they did here. They essentially took the DualSense and they modify it into a Pro controller. Now if you're wondering, did they take the regular DualSense or the DualSense Edge to modify the Phantom? Well, let me give you a hint. Check this out. Look at the bottom of the handle here, right? You see how it's flat? On the edge, it's rounded off. And on the regular DualSense, it's flat. Well, the obvious answer is they took the regular DualSense because the base DualSense controller is a lot easier to add stuff to. So how did they do? Well, first let's talk about the build quality. This thing is really well built. I would say it's probably the same as on the DualSense. And the rubber handles here makes it feel a lot more premium. It doesn't slip out of your hands or anything if it gets sweaty. In terms of weight, the regular DualSense is 10 ounces, the Edge 11.8, and let's see how much does this guy weigh. Just a little bit more than 10 ounces, 10.4 ounces to be exact. So if you value the controller being light, this guy is a lot lighter than the Edge. And you can actually physically feel it, even though it's only a few ounces apart, this one feels a lot lighter. The shoulder buttons and the triggers feel exactly the same. However, with this guy, you get trigger stops. This is only one level. It's either lock or unlock. And this is unlock. When it's in the lock position, the buttons feel like my switches. It feels really satisfying actually. When I play fighting games on this guy, I actually usually just leave it unlocked. And the reason being is, if you lock it, there's not much travel at all. And because they are my switches, they are so quick that the D-pad doesn't match up to it. Just like on the DualSense, these are rubber dome based switches. And this is what I'm talking about. So right now I have it locked. When I try to do this move, down and left trigger, here we go. The trigger comes out first and then down afterwards. It doesn't always happen that way, but it happens often enough where I find that if I just go ahead and not use it, it's a heck of a lot better for me and more consistent. And to be fair, a lot of the controllers that offers this option has this problem. So this issue is not exclusive to just this controller. However, with that being said, I do wish that the switches are consistent throughout. If you're going to use my switches, use it on all of the buttons. Again, just like on the DualSense, these are exactly the same. I really don't like how these are so far apart. This makes it really difficult to press two buttons at once. An example of this being an issue, with Blanca, to hop forward or backwards, see, I'm having a hard time. You've got to press all three of the kick buttons. I would need to press these two at the same time and the right trigger. But sometimes because the space here is too big, I only press one of these guys. If you have skinny thumbs and you can't consistently reach these two buttons, if you play Blanca, you're gonna have to be forced to play claw like this and reprogram the kick and punch button over here. I wish that these are a little bit closer. In terms of tension, these are exactly the same as on the DualSense. I feel like the resistance just right here. It's not too loose, and it's not too resistant either. Speaking of which, it comes with this guy with a ton of stick caps. So on one side, you're gonna get shorter stick caps. You get a dome stick cap here, 2 concave ones, and this really big and flat one. You see how huge this stick cap is? Holy moly. This big thing allows you to go from one side to the next really quickly. But for fighting games, I prefer the dome stick caps. This thing allows you to rotate and do 360 really easily. And on the other side, we got 2 dome long stick caps and 2 gigantic flat stick caps. Check out the difference. Holy shit. Look at this. My god. Who plays it like this? And why do you need it to be so damn long? That's insane. I guess this is good for shooters where you need precision. And in the package, you also get these joystick protector rings. So you just put it on here. There you go. Stick it back in. And these rings makes it really hard to spin it around. There's a lot of resistance. Alright, let's get to the D-pad. Is this good for fighting games? The answer is yes. This is very good for fighting games. This is better for 2D fighters than 3D fighters, I would say. And that's not to say that it's bad for 3D fighters like the OA6 here. It's good, it's just that it's better for 2D fighters. And the reason being, it comes back to the switches. These are rubber dome switches and they're very soft and you can't really feel it. Just like on the DualSense, I personally prefer clicky switches like on the Xbox. This way when you do a diagonal, you feel what button is being pressed. But on here, since it's so quiet, you can't really feel it. The good news is you do get used to it, I just don't prefer it. Now when it comes to D-pads like this, I like to do a wiggle test to see how much it wiggles. This is a one-piece D-pad. It may look like there's 4 pieces here, but it's actually just one. As you can see, if I move one, you see the other buttons also move. And there's not a lot of movement here. Unlike on the DualSense, look at how much it wiggles. Isn't that crazy? Look at this. When it wiggles like this, it's gonna affect the accuracy of your directions. And fortunately for us, this guy does not wiggle very much. I would say it's got the same kind of wiggle as on the Edge. And this is a very accurate D-pad. Double taps. Works great. I can also do my backdash pretty easily. Diagonals are really accurate. With that being said though, I do have trouble with up back. This move right here. And the reason being is look how vertical my thumb is. So I have to go through this down button to press up back. If you look at your thumb, it naturally kind of angled this way, right? But because the handle here is so vertical, and this is more due to the fact that it's using a DualSense shell. You see how the handle is just vertical, and it's the same thing here. Essentially, you kind of have to do this pinching motion to press up back. This is a little awkward to do, so sometimes I would just press back, or sometimes it would just activate up. If you're gonna place the D-pad here, I would have preferred the handle to angle outward a little bit more. So that way, if it's angled out like this, I can do up back a lot more natural, right? Aside from up back, everything else works really good. It's really accurate and responsive. If you flip the controller over, you're gonna see 4 back buttons here. These back buttons also use my switches. And as you can see here, they stick out a lot. Because of that, these things are kind of loose. You see how much they wiggle? I would prefer these guys to be a little bit shorter. But aside from that, these guys do feel great. Although I think these guys are positioned a little too high. It would have been better if they're positioned a little bit lower. The top 2 buttons are really hard to press. When you hold a controller like this, you see how it just naturally rests on the lower button. So it's kind of difficult for me to go up and press the 2 upper buttons. As far as I know, there's no software or anything to program the buttons. Everything is done on the controller. And if you're wondering if you can program multiple buttons on here at the same time, the answer is no. Only one button at a time. Maybe for the next one, they can make these guys a little more flush to the handle and bring it lower a little bit. That would be perfect. When it comes to 2D fighters, the softer buttons actually helps with motion inputs. If you've played Street Fighter at all, you know that you gotta slide your thumb around like crazy and it's gonna burn your thumb. With a harder D-pad like on the Xbox here, this thing is gonna shred your thumb. But on the softer D-pad like this guy, it's a lot easier on your thumb. Quarter circle movements are super easy to do. Half circles, piece of cake. Sliding motions, you can also do the double slide here. .360s, not a problem. 360s are easier to do when you're on the left side. And it's a little bit harder to do if you're on the right hand side. You can still do it, but I find that rotating this way, again, because this thing is so vertical, it becomes a little awkward when it gets to the up back position. For the double 360, you're gonna need to use the thumbstick for that. In terms of how the surface feels, it feels exactly like on the DualSense. It's smooth. However, because it is smooth, when your fingers get sweaty, it becomes kind of sticky. It does not slide as smoothly as something that's matte like this. You see how this thing is so easy to slide back and forth because it's matte. Other than 360s, this D-pad is pretty good for every other motion in Street Fighter. Solutions to stick drifts are a big thing nowadays. Some controllers, like on the edge here, you can just replace the whole stick. With other controllers like this guy right here, they have Hall effect sticks. Essentially, the sticks are magnetic. They're not mechanical. On the Phantom, it's neither. This thing is just a traditional analog mechanical stick. And this solution to stick drifts is up here. It's what's hidden behind this thing right here. What you're gonna need is pull out this little box again, and then you're gonna lift up this little foam thing, and what you're gonna find are a pair of these tools. You only need one of them. You're gonna use a flat edge here, pry it open, and what you'll find under here are dip switches. So hop on your PC, plug in the cable, and then go to this website right here. If you scroll down, you're gonna see 4 axes. Each one of these corresponds to one of the axes. So I'm gonna use the sharp edge here, and just put it in here and twist it. All right, check that out. You see how this thing's all off now because I've made the adjustment. Now let's switch it back. If you experience stick drifts, you can manually offset it. Now I'm happy that there is a solution to it, but this is not a perfect solution. First of all, this is too complicated. A regular person would not know how to do this. It's easier just to replace the whole thing, or better yet, use Hall effect sticks. This controller right here is not expensive at all, and it has Hall effect sticks. So this whole dip switch system, it feels like a band-aid more than a solution, honestly. And also, I feel like this is not really well thought out. In order for you to make adjustments, you need to plug in the cable, right? What if I want to make adjustments to the inner dip switches? Guess what? It's blocking it. I mean, who thought this was a good idea? If you're going to use this system, why don't you move this down here somewhere? Look at all this space, so I can adjust it freely. I mean, come on. Alrighty, it's time for a polling rate test. On wired, for minimum input delay, I got 1.66 milliseconds, maximum about 12 milliseconds. Jitter is 0.14 milliseconds, which is very good. Average input delay is 3.9 milliseconds. Anything below 4 milliseconds is pretty good. And the polling rate is at 256 Hz. It's very similar to all of these controllers right here. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Because one of them is the PS5 DualSense controller, what do you know? On wireless, unfortunately, the only thing I can get for it is a polling rate, and that ranges between 139 to 296. And the reason I'm not able to get these numbers is because the software that I've been using, it's just so buggy right now. It's not accurate at all. I had to use another software and it only provides me with these numbers. But even with this, you can tell just by the range here that being on wireless, specifically Bluetooth wireless, is very inconsistent. It can be really slow to really fast. So I highly recommend if you're gonna get this controller to plug it in. Speaking of wireless, I wanna also mention this. I'm gonna try to connect it to the Bluetooth on my computer. All right, it's blinking. All right, so you see it's connected, right? All right, did you see that? The minute that it gets connected, it just turns off. The controller's off now. And this is fully charged. When I use wireless mode on the PS5, it works perfectly. But for some reason, I can't get it to stay on the PC. I'm not sure if my unit is faulty or there's something wrong with my computer's Bluetooth. Alright, final thoughts. If you're someone who's a fan of the DualSense controller, then this controller is essentially the same controller, but a lot better. I really enjoy the interchangeable stick caps. There's so many of them. The back buttons are functional, although they are not perfect. I'm glad they're there though. And these dip switches here are unnecessarily complicated. Honestly, why do this even exist? Just implement Hall effect sticks. And this is really unfortunate, honestly, because I really do enjoy using this guy. It's got all the great features of the DualSense, and they just added a whole bunch of control options to it. The D-pad is particularly good for fighting games. I just can't shake the feeling that if this thing came out 3 years ago, this would be perfect. However, nowadays, we have options like the DualSense Edge and many other Pro controllers. This thing feels a little dated to me already. Alrighty, that's gonna be it for me. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe for more, and take care now.